Hello, ladies, and welcome to Storytime Saturday. Yes! So we are continuing on. For those of you who are new to my channel, I'm introducing you to myself. We're going back to my childhood. We're going through stages of my childhood. We're talking about boys. We're talking about me. We're getting to know the Cheng. Okay, so if you want to know more about me, then Storytime Saturdays is for you. And I'll be talking about other stories, other things, other people. I think it's just a great time. I love stories. If there's something that you know about me, I love stories. I love telling stories. I'm just a storyteller. My girlfriends love sitting around and hearing me tell stories. You know, I'm that sort of person who at the party, everybody's sort of watching me tell the story, and I'm usually very exciting in person. But I am here today and I just want to, I've had so many questions. Everybody wants to get to know me. Tell us a bit more about yourself. I would like to know more about your background. So I decided that this is the time, this is the year, and I'm going to call it Storytime Saturday. So get yourselves a cup of tea or coffee or whatever makes you happy. I haven't got my Christmas cup today, but I've got my white mug. And what's in here is Lemsip, because as you guys know, I've been struggling a little bit with my throat and just on and off cold, really annoying. So here I am. So if you want to watch the last Storytime Saturday, go look for it on my video list, and then we can catch up from there. So I had a question from a friend, and I thought that was really interesting because it's a great question. And actually from my New York angel, and she said to me, Chinky, what does your name mean? Like, where did your name come from? And actually it is interesting because everywhere I go when I introduce myself to people, before I go any further, I am Chengi, and you, my lovelies, are my world. Make sure you subscribe, like, share, comment, spread the good news. Let's get this party started. And feel free to put in the comment section if you've got any questions that you want me to cover about myself, and I will be happy to answer it if I can. So, basically, my name is Chengi, and Chengi is short for Chengetai. Chengetai. Chengetai is the name that my father gave me, and Chengetai means cherish. Zimbabweans would shorten my name by saying Chenge. So when I meet Zimbabweans, they're like, what's your name? I'm like, Chengi. They're like, what? Chengi. What is it? Chenge! Oh, okay. Because, they don't sort of turn it's sort of air rather than E. When I came to England, Chengetai means, I don't know if I've already said this, but Chengetai means cherish or look after or take care of. But it's just easier. I always say it means cherish. But it's in and around the same thing, and that's what it means. Look after with tenderness and with caring. And I was given that name by my father. I am one of the few children, if any, that my father named. The rest were named by my mom or her family. But my dad named me Chengetai because at the time that I was born, he was very, 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 very ill, and everybody thought he was going to die. He was like on his deathbed. So I was being born in the other bedroom because at that time, our moms used to give birth at home. You know what I mean? So here I was, being born in the other room, and my dad is thinking he's on his way out, okay? And then, they presented the baby to him in the room, and he saw me, and he said, to his family who were around, he said to them, I want you to look after my little girl, and I'm going to call her Chengi so that you remember to look after her. So every time you say her name, Chengetai, you will remember that I asked you to look after her. Okay, and then he called me, my second name is Charity, which means, and he said, whenever you call her name Charity, I want you to be kind and charitable to her. So her name is Chengetai, Charity. Remember to look after my baby girl and be charitable. Turns out the old man didn't die after all. Okay, he lived, and turns out I look like his mommy. Of all of my sisters, I look like his mom. So my dad and I were joined at the hip. Everyone in my family knows that, you probably wouldn't want me to say this out loud, but I was daddy's girl, 100%. If my sisters wanted anything from my dad, they would send me. And my younger sister said, that's because you just look like his mom. Okay, so yes, I look like my grandmother. And maybe I'll tell you a bit more about her later on. But my grandmother was a super special woman. and I look exactly like her, and everyone's like, oh my god, you look like your grandma. But obviously growing up, I looked like my dad, who clearly looks like, so I was the girl who looked like her father, but I was joined with him at the hip. We were always together. My dad was my world. And chances are the reason why I'm very intuitive about men, because your father is the first person that you know, who teaches you about men, who teaches you about who they are. And my dad was not a man of very many words. He was definitely one of those sort of quiet African dads, but when he opened his mouth to speak, it was always something really profound and life-changing. So my dad and I were very, very, very close. Definitely daddy's girl. There's nothing, I just would go to my dad and go, and I would get anything I want, right? So I was really a bit of a brat. I was a little bit spoiled. But I was genuinely, I think, because of the circumstances of my birth, he thought he was going to die. I think I represented so much to him that we were genuinely joined at the hip. We loved each other. My dad adored me, and I adored my dad. And I could do no wrong as far as my dad was concerned. And he was just my world. I think I've sort of made that point. But sort of, obviously, he divorced my mom. They separated when I was about 9. But even then, we remained close. I would always go and see him at work, and we would spend a lot of time together. But it also sort of created trauma in my emotional space, because as a child I didn't realize that he was rejecting my mom. I thought he was rejecting me. So I grew up with a lot of rejection. I grew up feeling rejected, and it took a visiting prophet at the church that I was in to sort of point that out to me. And it was a time of real healing, because even though I remained close to him, I did not rationalize as a child that it wasn't me my dad was rejecting. It was my mom. But he left our home, and I felt like he left me. So that created a lot of trauma and a lot of issues that I had with men, and a feeling that I couldn't trust them. And my dad was a wonderful dad to me and to my sisters, but his relationship with my mom was very, very difficult, and he found solace in other women. And that's not to excuse his behavior, but that's what he did. So in so doing, he made it normal for me that men could not be trusted, that men are going to cheat. Even the best of men, like even the most amazing guy in the world, who of course was my dad, he's going to cheat if he's not happy. And that cheating was a woman's thing. My mom was clearly not a good wife, so my dad had to go and cheat. So a lot of my understandings that were false or broken came from this example that I had of this man that I adored, who just could not be faithful to my mom, who couldn't, who loved his daughters without a shadow of a doubt. We were his world, but failed to love our mom. And we didn't realize that we were learning from him what we were to expect from men. And he didn't realize, obviously he wasn't saved, he didn't know Jesus, and he was doing the best he could in a time and an era where men were allowed to do those things, and it wasn't something that was shunned upon, especially in Africa, was like standards. We saw our mom cry a lot and suffer a lot emotionally. But I think if my dad had known that it's not okay to just be a good dad to your daughters, that being a good dad is being a good husband too, because you set a standard for what they expect from men. So I really had a very low expectation, a low standard of what I expected from men, and I would probably say it's the same for my sisters. We didn't expect men to treat us well. It wasn't an expectation. We just thought he can be a good guy, but our dad is a good guy, and he didn't treat my mom very well. He didn't demonstrate what we were to expect. The only thing my dad would give us is sort of words of wisdom, and don't ever marry a man who doesn't buy you a diamond ring. So yes, that is where my obsession with diamond rings come from. I am not a materialistic and any circumstances. I'm not even a jewelry wearing person. I'm not, I'm not somebody who's into bracelets and all that stuff. But I think my obsession with having a really nice ring comes from, some of the doctrines that my dad gave me, but it did kind of mess up, my psyche. And I share the story with you because not to sort of expose my dad or make him seem like a bad man, especially now that he's passed away, and, you never want to speak ill of the dead, but to let us all know that our relationship with our fathers determines our relationship with men in general. And if that relationship was not healthy, in its entirety, it is going to affect your choices of men. It's going to affect how you relate to men and how you perceive men. And it took until I was sort of even married, until I met a life coach and a therapist who said to me, you actually hate men. You don't realize it, but you hate them. And it was like a light bulb moment. And I realized I actually didn't. I actually was one of these women who hated men, but I wasn't aware that I had that, that I was suffering from that. So I learned that, from my parents, from the way my mom responded. So even as women, we have a responsibility to our daughters, the things we share with them, the things that we demonstrate. My mom never taught me how to be a wife. She was a rotten wife. My dad was a rotten husband. My mom was not a nurturing woman to my dad. I never saw tenderness between them. I never saw her serving him. I never saw submission. I always saw fighting, and so I didn't have an example of how to be a woman. So even when I started, dating or started coming out and said, well, I didn't even know how to be a nurturing. I've had to teach myself all of these things as a person who's been developing myself. So when you read my bio and I talk about myself, is I've only just become whole. I had to work for the last 7 years of my life, just really focusing on becoming a whole person and redefining myself and digging through my past to fix it. But yes, on both sides, my father did not demonstrate what I needed to look for, and my mom did not demonstrate what it was to cherish and to nurture a man. So I had to learn that in my own marriage. I had to learn that as I was struggling through my marriage, I had to go to the Word of God and say, what does a woman do? What is submission? What does it look like? I had to train myself. And, I've got a blog, my WordPress blog. If you're on Instagram, you can just go to my link tree and find my blog about my wrestling with submission. I had an issue with that. I could love, I could do everything else, but I just couldn't submit. Like, I had an issue with submission. But that's because I never saw it at play. And until I saw a woman, when I was married and I went back to Zimbabwe, and I saw a woman, showing me the beauty of submission and how she graciously and beautifully did it. So you can read that blog, because it really breaks down what really changed in me, where I realized how beautiful and how excellent submission is when it's done right, and to a man who truly, cherishes and loves his wife. So it took me a while to really get that round. But one of the things that I had about me is I was always the cute little child. So I learned later that I was given a gift by God much later in life, that I had this specific and particular gift, and I don't know why God chose to give it to me, where I have a drawing effect on men. Like, I didn't understand it as a child, but I remember starting primary school, and for a good term or so, the little boys would follow me home. They would be like, I want to marry you. I want to marry you. And I would cry all the way home. I didn't understand. I thought they were teasing me. I thought they were they were trying to be funny. I thought they were really being mean. I didn't understand until I pretty much went through life, and men still responded to me that way. And I didn't get it, because I always looked at myself from within myself. I didn't understand until much later in life I realized, it's not, when I look in the mirror, I just see a girl. But there are things that we carry spiritually, the auras that we have, and the spiritual positionings that we have, and spiritual gifts that we have, that sort of play themselves out when we're still young and we don't really understand. But I realized that I had a particular intuition and a particular drawing and a particular understanding, something particularly special when it came to men, that as I went to, grew up in primary school and, went to secondary school, I noticed that I had a thing. There was something between me and men. I just got them, and they got me, and I was very attractive to them. not because I was the prettiest girl in the room, but there was something in my spirit about my aura that really just was attractive to men, and how we could be friends, and I bonded with them. And throughout secondary school, I was closer to guys. They got me better, and I seemed to be incapable of actually getting on with girls. And I think that happens to quite a few, girls in school. But I had a lot of guy friends growing up, which again contributes to why I'm so intuitive and why I do what I do, and why I get men and men get me, and we just get each other, was a lot to do with my time spent with men and boys. Growing up, I was always closer to my guy cousins than to my girl cousins. I grew up very much in the presence of men, and clearly sort of getting to grips with their psyche. I just totally got them, and they totally got me. So that was sort of me at school. So I was a naughty little girl. In primary school, I was extremely naughty. I used to get up to all kind of naughty. I was so terrible. I can't imagine, but I remember always being in trouble. I was like young and small and naughty. Yeah, I know, it's hard to believe, huh? But when I got to secondary school, I really sobered up, worked very hard. And that's where I really came into my own. Even though I had a relationship with God and would sit under a tree and talk to him every day after school as a little girl, somewhere between sort of my parents splitting and sort of mid-secondary school, I lost my faith in God. And when I got to secondary school, I had an encounter where I met a girlfriend who introduced me to a youth group. And in that youth group, I started to really begin to have a relationship with God, and found myself back and building my Christianity, and being introduced to the concept and the person of the Holy Spirit. And that literally transformed my whole sort of entire life. And from then, it sort of balanced out my relationship with boys, because I was then taught to walk pure and to be a virgin and to honor my body and to walk in holiness and have purity. So it meant that I didn't let boys mess with me and fiddle with me and see me as a sexual, sort of abuse my body. I kept it in high regard, and it was just that perfect timing of God where had I not encountered God, what I carry and the attraction that I have, that men have towards me, without God tapering it and bringing it into divine alignment, I probably would have ended up in some sort of slutty situation or in a very vulnerable situation. But I knew very early, because of my interaction with God and with the Holy Spirit, to be very vigilant about my sex life and to be very protective of my purity. So I remained pure until I got married. Is pretty much that story. But it also allowed me to walk with men and honor myself and honor them, and just have really healthy relationships with men, which is why I still am able to do that. So I went to boarding school. That was quite tough in primary school. I went to Sinoia Primary. So if there's anybody watching who's ever been to Sinoia Primary, I went to Sinoia Primary in Chinoy, and I went to boarding school, and that really toughened me up. I think really made me an individual. And the reason my mom sent me there is because apparently I wasn't coping very well with their divorce. So and looking back, I don't think I was at all. So they thought if they took me out of the environment, and so they put me in boarding school where I felt extremely lost. But I had to survive. There was no mom, no one to look after me. I had to do my own hair. So people always talk about why I'm so independent and do things for myself, is because I had to be. And I thank God for that, because I've had to endure so many hardships in my life and pick myself up and get my life going, that if I'd not been exposed to that as a young child, the ability to just survive, boarding school was a bit like that for me. And then I went to secondary school where it was a Christian school, and again, my interactions with boys were very, very simple. I was actually very shy romantically, because I was so unskilled, on that front. So boys didn't really feature. I had a crush on, I'm writing a book, and all the details are in there, all the juicy details are in there. So, look out for my book. But you know, I'm just sort of giving the stuff, I guess, that's relevant, so that you ladies understand where the birthing of Chengi's World and why I do is steeped in so much more history than what seems apparent. It wasn't just such a good idea for me to get started with Chengi's World, but it comes from this history there. So so I went to secondary school, and guys were my friends. And secondary school was Gateway High School. I went to Gateway High School. So if you've ever been to Gateway High School, hello everyone from Gateway. I was a school prefect, high achiever, not very academic. I struggled with academics, not because I was stupid. I thought it's because I was stupid. But in reality, I struggled with academics because I didn't see the point. I was an artist. In every shape, way, or form. When I was in art class, painting, doing charcoals, drawing, that's what made my soul sing. When I was performing on stage, when I was singing, I was such a creative, and still am a very creative soul, that I didn't understand why I had to waste time in physics and chemistry or working out mathematics. I didn't get it. But I was in the top stream in my school. Like, you know, I don't know if they do it here, but I don't think they do anymore. But in Africa, you got the A stream and the B stream and the C stream. So that's, you know, based on. So I was in the top stream. I was tested and had enough of an IQ. And I now realize that I was very, very, very intelligent. It's just that I wanted my creativity. And I see that a lot in my son. He's very intelligent, but he's such a creative. That when you're a creative mind and you're a creative person, you can be misunderstood very easily as not being deep, but actually you are probably beyond deep, and you're smarter than probably most people are. Because what I found is when I left school, academics was so easy for me, like nothing. Like I used to pass my tests with average, with a C, without even studying. So I had a brain, I just didn't like to use it for academics. And you know, growing up in a culture in Zimbabwe where you're not good at maths or physics, chemistry, or any of these sciences, it was like there's no hope for you. And it kind of worked out in my favor, because it kind of meant that the only nation, I think I said in my first video, I always felt like a stranger in my country. So I knew that Zimbabwe would not be able, I would never make it into the Zimbabwean university, because you had to be like ridiculously clever, or African universities, you had to be like so academic, you know. And I knew I was not going to make it. So my parents knew I wasn't going to make it. So my journey and my destiny was always going to be abroad. And I'll tell you a little bit about that in the next video. We'll talk about how and when I came to England, and you know, that journey too, and perhaps it will reveal my sort of understanding, you know, where I've come from as well when it comes to my relationships with men, and the things I've gleaned and I've learned. And I hope that by telling you my story, ladies, you can see a bit of your story in mine, and perhaps see where your brokenness, or where you're not quite getting it, or the areas that you need to work at. So thank you so much for watching. See me on Instagram and Facebook. I don't want to take too much of your time, but thank you so much for watching and stopping by. If you're new to this channel, ladies, take care of you. Love you. Mwah.